Hi, welcome to episode 6. We all dream of having a coaching staff with 6 assistants with whom we can discuss aspects like attack, defense, set pieces. However, we've all been through situations where we didn't have even one assistant to help us. It can be due to having a weak network, not enough money to pay for one, or simply because our assistant called in sick. If you don't like to do 11 against 11 all season long, then stay with us as we share with you ideas of how coaches can deliver fun competitive sessions to a big group of players by themselves. One of the main problems that may surface from this kind of context is that you may not be able to set up the training session beforehand because someone else might be using the training pitch. You may also not know how many players you will have in the session. Especially if you're alone to set things up, these circumstances may influence negatively the flow of the training session. Even though this is a far from ideal scenario, there are still ways to go around it. To begin with, I cannot stress enough that planning is a key aspect in this. Eliminating doubts and dilemmas that may surface in the middle of the session will actually free the coach to focus on the athlete's performance rather than thinking about what's going to happen next. The ability to plan a training session with minimal, if any, movement of heavy materials like, for example, goals, will allow you to control in a better way the transitions and also reduce the time of water breaks. That in turn will lead to a more flowing, more intense session. If you still need to buy some time, then you can leverage your team captain and have him set an example and control the other players, as they do some activities like, for example, planks or push-ups while you're setting up. Many coaches still choose the easy way of telling players to run around the pitch while they are setting up in the beginning. I've done that myself in the early stages of my career, however, I'm still trying to find one player that enjoys doing that. Instead, one alternative can be to allow some free time in the beginning of the session for the players to do whatever they want. You can also create a more recreational activity that doesn't require your presence for the players to play and have contact with the ball. I will be posting my suggestion on the WhatsApp group, for which you can find a link in the description. In case coaches are struggling with numbers because the group is too big, there's at least 2 ways to go about it. Firstly, what's easier to control, 6 or 7 players at a time or 17? Well, by planning these smaller numerical relations in game-related exercises, it allows the coach to have a better control of the session without overlooking the teaching of game principles. And how can you achieve that? Well, by having exercises with lines or cues. However, what if it's too cold to have the players standing in lines? An alternative can be to have 2 similar exercises, 2 games side by side, that don't require much attention to detail from the coach, but that will stimulate the players in different ways. Let me show you how in the pitch. So, for solo coaches, it's helpful that the whole team is gathered in one task. While the easy way to go is set up a formal game, what if you have 24 players plus goalkeepers? For that reason, we share with you this game-related exercise to work on game principles under a variable and predictable context. The game starts 3v3, and as soon as the defender intercepts or the shot is placed, the last player to touch the ball from the attacking team has to run around one of the 6 cones. In the meantime, 3 other reds will come out with the ball, making for a temporary 3v2 situation, and so on. This way, a solo coach can focus all his attention in one task. Because the play is short yet intense, there is enough rotation and the 3 lines in each team allow for the waiting time to be bearable. Alternatively, coaches can opt for a different approach. It has happened that the weather conditions made it criminal to have the players standing in the cold. To avoid that, setting up 2 games side by side and calling one the Champions League and the other the Europa League will trigger natural competitiveness without much coach feedback or attention. Adding to that, in the Champions League you can play a normal game of 6v6 and in the Europa League make it 4v4 with 2 bouncers. While in the Champions League you're promoting the competitive aspect, in the Europa League you are promoting the understanding of game principles such as width, mobility, etc. Moving on to another problem, it's often the case that you see a coach running after a ball or having to go inside to get some material that's missing. One way you have to leverage the few resources that you have available is to assign more responsibility to the players. Delegating and building habits of responsibility and cooperation, like for example, you have to get the ball after you shoot it, will lift a heavy weight from the coach's shoulders in the sessions. You can even integrate it in exercises as a constraint to create slight numerical advantages. Those numerical advantages will then trigger the player's learning and development of the principles of the game. Let me show you what I mean on the pitch. In this game of 5 against 5 plus goalkeepers, the game is played normally until the ball goes out or a goal is scored. When it happens, the last player to have touched the ball needs to go get it back and place it in an empty space. The empty space will appear as the other team restarted play with any of the 4 balls available on the sides. That way, not only the coach stimulates a temporary numerical advantage, but also unpredictability, as players are the ones who decide where to start from. This way, you are simultaneously teaching the principles of the game and the players are gathering the balls for themselves, which is a big help if you're alone. Additionally, many times the coaches feel the need to lecture a player and have a one-on-one conversation with them. However, when you're alone, if you go towards the player to have that conversation, you may lose your positioning and the control of what's happening in the session in the meantime. Alternatively, you should have the player come towards the coach and not the other way around. That way the coach can have the conversation but not forfeit his positioning and the control of what's happening. Since I mentioned positioning, it's very important that coaches don't neglect it. Even if the coach decides to go with 2 or 3 different stations running simultaneously, it's very important that he adopts a positioning that allows him to watch all 3 at the same time. Now, I'm not saying that it's possible to control the 3 stations with detail, but taking advantage of our peripheral vision may prevent a lot of behaviors that only happen when the coach isn't watching. Moving on to this episode's Q&A, I got a question from a coach that has a very excitable group, making it hard to control them. Well, let me tell you about my experience. A couple of years ago, I also had a group that was very excitable. They were happy that they were seeing their friends, they were happy that they had just left school, and their attention span was not the greatest. So after trying some different approaches, I realized that their training ran smoother when the first exercise was physically demanding. Now, I know that many coaches oppose to starting strong, but I want to remind you that these were kids and that we will be covering the topic of warm-up in the next episode. With that in mind, I suggest you plan ways to spend their energy from the get-go so that, in a way, you can tame them for the rest of the session. To see how I did it, follow the link for the WhatsApp group. I was also asked how it affects the team's performance to be coached by a full coaching staff versus a solo coach. Well, if you take equally talented teams and you assign them a full coaching staff, then you're able to go into more details that will increase the performance. For example, you can set up 2 or 3 stations, different stations, and assign 1 coach for each station, allowing to go into more detail. Just another example, just having a goalkeeper coach can make such a big difference related with not having one. But I wouldn't dwell too much on this because in the end of the day, the quality of the players will dictate the overall performance. To show you what I mean, if you have equally competent coaches and you have 1 less talented team with a full coaching staff and 1 more talented team with a solo coach, more times than not, the more talented team will win the less talented team. Now, because this is one of the most overrated concerns in football training, we will be talking about our take on warm-ups in training and in the game. For that reason, comment below 1 key aspect of the warm-ups in your teams. Until then, you can continue your development as a coach with the daily content across all the social media channels linked in the description. For example, there you can find the drill pill challenges where coaches have to create exercises from randomly drawn constraints. Different points of view and all the ideas are discussed in the WhatsApp group. Once again, thank you for watching.